Hello everyone, this is Rick, and welcome to a special Astral Club video. I want to give everyone a heads up first. This is not going to be your typical Astral Club video. If you do not or are not interested in possibly having your worldview upset, upended, this is not the video for you. I would advise you to click off and go watch one of the other videos on the channel. So take a moment to think about it. Are you still there? Okay, then let's go forward. The reason I didn't put up a video last week was because I fell ill with bronchitis. I still have it now. It's interesting, whenever I want to talk about this particular topic over the past number of years, I always fall ill, usually with bronchitis. And I'm not somebody who gets sick very often. It's a very curious situation. However, I have decided to press forward because this video is necessary and I need to share this information. In addition, anyone who's read Robert Monroe's books, especially Far Journeys, you have encountered what I'm going to talk about now. But if you haven't, you may not be aware of this particular truth, which we're going to talk about now. And I think it's crucial because it's one of the main reasons why I started Astral Club. Yes, I said I want to get people on the astral plane. And I think it's important for people to enjoy themselves on the astral plane. For instance, last night I went to Antarctica, which is what I usually do when I need a place of solitude. I like Antarctica because there's no noise of people's thoughts. It's like a background noise which you hear whenever you travel around your typical populated areas. Most experienced astral projectors just ignore it, like you might somebody who left the television on in the background. But it can be noticeable. So I go to Antarctica, I fly around. I usually love flying around the shores there, and I didn't see a lot of snow in the part that I was at. It was just, your typical gray, rocky type shore with the waves and the coast, and I just find it's like my meditative place. I just love it there. And then I went to do my main mission, which was to explore the topic that we're going to discuss now. I mentioned that one of Robert Monroe's books was Far Journeys. When I read that book in 1985, it blew my mind. I enjoyed Journeys Out of the Body, his first book. It was great. It showed me that I wasn't alone, that there was someone else out there having experiences just like mine, who was alive and writing at that point in time. Previously, I'd just been able to find references to ancient texts where the Ka would travel through the astral planes. But this was something that was happening now. So I was eager when I heard he had another book coming out. And when I read Far Journeys, it was definitely further along than Journeys Out of the Body. In Far Journeys, he met entities who had never had a third dimensional lifetime, who he had some connection to. He called it Inspec, which was intelligent species. He had one particular acquaintance he called BB, which gave him a lot of information, which he shared in the book. And in one particular chapter, I'll never forget it. It was called Hearsay Evidence. In this chapter, he was given information by this BB creature that you can call it a foundation myth, if you like. You can call it a Genesis myth, if you like. It went about to explain why we're here, why life is here on this planet. And when I read it, I was dramatically affected. I went through the 5 stages of grief. I went through denial at first. As a matter of fact, when I first read the chapter, I threw the book across the room. And for days after that, I wouldn't touch it. Till eventually, I started getting angry. I said, I have to read this over again. Perhaps I made a mistake. And I had this book for years, too. It had a tear in the cover from when I threw it. I read it again, and true enough, it was exactly as I had seen it. I bargained with myself. How can I get out of this? I became deeply depressed. And then I formed a certain acceptance, or perhaps a better word is resolve. And when I met Bob Monroe, about a year later, we had a discussion on this topic, because I had to go to the Monroe Institute, and he went through a very similar stage for about a month himself. So consider this your last heads up. If this doesn't sound like something that you can handle right now, please, you will not offend me. Just click away and go check out one of the other videos. If you've listened to any of my videos, you know I mentioned the movie The Matrix quite a bit. And it's one of my favorite movies, if not my most favorite movie. You could forget the 2 sequels, but that first movie, if you haven't seen it, see it. It's important. And there's this pivotal scene where Neo has been abducted by this terrorist, quote unquote, named Morpheus. And he's placed in this situation. He's offered 2 different pills. One is a blue pill. One is a red pill. He tells him that if he takes the blue pill, he'll wake up in his room. He can think of this as a dream and just go about his everyday life and forget everything. However, if he takes the red pill, Morpheus will show him just how deep the rabbit hole goes. He tells him, the only thing that I'm promising you is the truth. And that's what I'm offering here. Now, I have an extremely open mind, and I would love nothing more than some experienced astral projector to come along, perhaps an Astral Club member, and tell me that they have been able to prove this particular theory, reality, truth, whatever, as false. I would love nothing more than that. However, it's unlikely, I would think, at this stage. When I was a kid, and we'll get into the central concept in a minute, I promise you. But when I was a kid, I was in Sunday school. I told you in the past I was raised as a Christian. And I was also a little junior businessman. I would buy candy in bulk, and then I would sell it to the little kids who couldn't cross the street to go to the candy store at a profit. So I understood very much what it took to bargain. That if I gave someone something, they gave me something of value in return. And that's how the world worked. I remember asking my Sunday school teacher when she was talking about our Heavenly Father. And she said that He gave us life, He gave us food, He gave us this beautiful earth to exploit. He gave us all these things. And I remember asking her, well, what do we give Him in return? And at first she was stunned. She didn't know quite how to answer. But she said, well, we worship Him. And then I asked her, what's worship? And she said, well, it's like when you say thank you to someone for giving you something. Or you praise Him. You say, oh, how wonderful you are for doing this. And I guess that made some sense to me, because I knew as a kid that when my parents praised me, that made me feel good. It made me want to do things that would get more praise. So I guess that quid pro quo made some sense to me. But still there was, as Neo had in his mind, a splinter, something that didn't make sense. because that inside businessman of me just didn't understand why there would be a being somewhere that would go to such trouble for us or for life in general just because. It didn't make sense. It didn't make sense with what I knew of the world, which was you don't get something for nothing. In Hearsay Evidence, the chapter of Far Journeys, Robert Monroe's book that so affected me, and indeed it affected him, there is a term, Loosh. And let's just use this term. It's as good as any other. It describes a certain type of life force, an emotional, spiritual energy, a radiation, if you will, that is undetectable to third dimensional life, i.e. us. It is a substance which is so valued in our universe by higher dimensional beings that it is sought out after throughout the universe by these higher beings. They explore the universe looking to harvest this energy. And imagine it being super oil, super gas, super gold, super precious metals, super drugs, all rolled up into one. A superfood, if you will. And this is the most precious thing around, and it is necessary, or at least desired, by these beings. Now, Monroe was given this information, as I said earlier, by this acquaintance, this extraterrestrial acquaintance of his that had never had a physical lifetime. And it told him that the reason our solar system, the reason our planet Earth, this garden, is in existence is because some entity made a decision. It said, I wonder if we could actually farm Loosh, if we could harvest it in some sort of a controlled environment. Much like we have fishermen who go out into the sea and they fish and they collect these wild fish for people's dinner tables. But we also have farms, fish farms, where they have control over the process. They can feed these fish in a controlled environment to make sure that they have all the omega-3s and all of the vitamins that are necessary inside them so that they can harvest them in a controlled environment, one in which is renewable and is under control. So this entity decided that it was going to create an environment in an area that had this beautiful solar energy system called the sun already operating. And it formed this planet Earth, and used its power to start the life cycle. Now, it was a very experimental process. It started in the earliest stages with what we know of as single-celled aquatic life forms. This resulted in unrefined Loosh, which could only be harvested in small quantities at the exact moment of death. Later experimentation brought about plants, which were a higher order of Loosh producers than the unicellular initial life forms. Even later experiments yielded larger mobile animals that emitted better quality but still unrefined Loosh. The best quality Loosh was eventually produced during the struggle for survival, a conflict, and somehow this created much purer Loosh. So you had these animals consuming plants, which created some Loosh. But then he set these animals against one another in a predator cycle. This apparent conflict created much better Loosh. And these animals we would know today as dinosaurs. Now, these mobiles, these dinosaurs, did produce more quality loosh, but they were found to be too large. They had too long a lifespan to be practical in the long term. So, in one single motion, this being decided to shake the Etch-a-Sketch. Did you have that when you were a kid? They still have that? He decided to kick over the sandbox and start all over again. We may know this as the 66 million year old event, the KT event, where a meteor struck the Yucatan Peninsula and pretty much wiped out the dinosaurs and somewhere around 70% of life on Earth. So the process began again. And eventually it gave rise to the mammalians, which began to produce even more sophisticated and better quality loosh. Finally, the key experiment was tried. This being, this someone, took a piece of himself. He implanted it in a species of primate. And it caused the evolution of a self-aware being. That self-aware being we call humans today. And the loosh produced became unexpectedly pure, unexpectedly refined, and valuable. And it found that the loosh was even more important, even better, when death happened through conflict with other humans, when loneliness was experienced, when strong emotions, negative or positive, love or hate, produce great quantities of loosh. And when death happened and sorrow was felt by the other still existing humans, that even greater quantities of loosh were created. So what you had here was a fundamental baseline formula. The creation of pure distilled loosh is now being created, and this is why we're here. This is why humans are here on this planet. Now, I think you can understand that when I first read this, it affected me a couple of different ways. First of all, that kid in me, the one who asked the question in Sunday school, got his answer, got a much better answer than I think the Sunday school teacher was able to give me. As much as this affected me emotionally, as much as this pushed me off my center, as much as it overturned my worldview and where I thought I fit in this world, and indeed where I thought my species fit, which I had considered was at the top of the food chain. Therefore, nothing ate us. I was knocked out. I was just knocked out. I didn't know exactly what to do, but it made sense to me. Now I understand why this Heavenly Father, if you will, may have done what he did. For instance, imagine if cows and pigs and sheep were self-aware beings. They might say to themselves, wow, what a great guy this farmer is. He does all this work for us. He gives us this great field to walk around in. He feeds us. He gives us medicine when we need it. And I just think it's great. I think we should praise him. But we know there's a reason the farmer does all of this work. It's because he gets milk from the cows and he gets the wool from the sheep. However, we also know that at times the farmer makes a decision, an economic decision. He says, well, the beef of the cow is now much more valuable to me than the milk. Or the mutton from the sheep is more valuable to me than the wool. And perhaps the animals might be convinced, if they were self-aware, that surrendering their wool and surrendering their milk was worth being put up in a room and board situation. But I'm not quite so sure they would be okay with the meat harvesting aspect of that bargain. When I encountered this, I also tried to find out other people's perspective, people who have read that chapter and been acquainted with what I will call the Robert Monroe creation myth. And there's one perspective that says, well, we should just be happy. We should be happy because if this someone didn't harvest Loosh, we wouldn't be here. So this heavenly farmer is doing us a big favor. And we should just be happy and just continue to be good little farm animals. I think you might be able to tell by my inflection there that while I respect that viewpoint, and if anyone here listening to this takes that viewpoint, I can't prove you wrong. It's a viewpoint that you might very well argue, but I look at it this way. We exist in a world that, while a beautiful garden has conflict, it has suffering, and that many people have asked what the meaning is in their lives. Why are we here? Why is there this suffering? Why is there this conflict? Why does it exist? And I think many of us just tell ourselves, well, it's just humanity. It's just who we are. It's just what we do. And it's nobody's fault. It's just the way it is. But if this creation myth is at all true, in any way, shape, or form, that we are being farmed, that this energy from our conflicts, from our starvations, from our hatred, from our love, from the birth and death of our loved ones is being harvested, and that perhaps it is being controlled in some way, that we are being controlled in some subtle way, that I have a hard time just being happy and smiling about that. When I first encountered this, I went searching for answers. And again last night, after I had got my center in Antarctica, I decided to do some reconnoitering once again, and I repeated a journey that I repeated those many years ago. I went into space around the Earth, and I asked to be able to see this Loosh, this radiated energy. And I saw it around the Earth, pouring out of the Earth in varying quantities and thicknesses, in a very type of viscous fluid state. The colors were the colors of the rainbow. And they were, as I said, they were wicking away from various spots on the Earth in varying quantities. It seemed like the more densely populated areas had more densely populated viscous Loosh fluid oozing off of them. As it went into space, I went close to it and allowed the tiniest fraction to integrate with my being. When that happened, it happened once before and it happened again last night, I felt as powerful, as energized, as fulfilled as I've ever felt in my entire life. I have never taken illegal drugs like heroin in this lifetime, but I have read accounts of people who have. And I would estimate that this feeling that I got from just this tiny portion of this Loosh is probably 1,000 times better than the best heroin that has ever been created. And indeed, each time I've encountered it, I have not willingly let it go. Each time I was forcibly pulled back by my astral cord because I could not separate myself from this stuff. But as I was being pulled back this time, and by the way, I can't explain to you everything I experienced because the English language is woefully inadequate to do so. I experienced also all of the emotions, all of the experiences that everyone who had emitted this bit of Loosh experienced. It all came in this tremendous rush, and it's the English language is just not capable of conveying to you what I experienced. But this energy, this radiation, I watched it disappear into this area in space where what I would imagine, it was like a wormhole opening. The closest thing I can think of, and perhaps this all, whenever you interpret something like the fourth dimension, for instance, your own third dimensional prejudices are pressed upon it, are used as a way for you to understand it. So what I saw looked like a Deep Space Nine wormhole. If you've ever watched that Star Trek Deep Space Nine. At any rate, this energy hole opened up and the Loosh went into the hole and then closed again. So what that tells me, and what I experienced years before when I did the same thing, was that this energy is going somewhere to be used by someone. Since I had that initial experience when I saw the Loosh the first time back in the mid-'80s, and when I encountered it and talked about it with Bob Monroe, I made a decision that I would subtly do my own investigations, and that I would eventually, if my health would permit me, and perhaps this will be my last video ever, I certainly hope not, but that I would share this information with others. And if anyone else was interested in exploring this topic, in trying to find out more, is this true? And believe me, if somebody could prove to me this is wrong, I would be eternally grateful to you. I would like nothing more than to say this was all a bad dream and it's not true. However, as I said earlier, the reason I started this channel wasn't just because I want bodies on the astral plane. I do not get commissions from the Astral Travel and Tourism Institute. I don't want people on the astral plane just there taking up space and having fun. There's nothing wrong with that. I do it myself. But I think it's necessary that we as humans take the next step. We need to find out if this is true. Are we being farmed? And is this something which we should continue to just lay down and permit? Perhaps you can make a comment explaining to me that you believe that that's what we should do, that we shouldn't rock the boat, that we should be good little cows and good little sheep. And maybe you'll be able to convince me. But I believe that we need a cell of people, that we need an underground cell, working quietly, finding out more about this process. And if perhaps there is some way we can seize control over our own destiny again, and perhaps not just allow ourselves to continue to be farm animals. Because if cows, if sheep were able to become self-aware, would they just meekly submit to their contained and caged lives where they are farmed, where their milk and wool is taken, and where eventually they are placed in the slaughterhouse and their young are placed in the slaughterhouse for the tables of their owners? I think perhaps the true destiny of mankind is to take control over our future and perhaps, subtly fight these extra dimensional beings, and at the very least let them know that we're aware of what's going on, and that this will not continue forever without our consent. Well, I know this is a much heavier episode than you are used to hearing from me, but as I said, this is something which I believe is necessary to share. Since we talked about Robert Monroe, I figured you would eventually read Far Journeys anyway. I would definitely recommend you find Far Journeys on Amazon, on Kindle, or buy the book. If you cannot afford the book, you will find that there are a number of free downloadable copies on Google. If you just, you Google Far Journeys, Robert Monroe PDF, you will find the book there. And as I said, the chapter I was talking about here in this entire episode was hearsay evidence. So perhaps read it for yourself, and I am very much interested. As you know, I'm always interested in your comments and questions. I am particularly interested in them in this particular episode because if we're to accomplish this underground cell, I'm going to need help. And I can't think of better qualified people than Astral Club members. If you liked this video, and I don't know if like is the right word, but please hit the like button, share it if you have other like-minded people. Subscribe if you haven't done so already. And as I said, please comment and I will respond. Well, thank you for your attention, and thank you for being Astral Club members, and I will see you on the astral plane.